Today, we are diving into the world of H.P. Lovecraft. In particular, we're going to be focusing on the blind idiot god, the nuclear chaos, the lord of all things and the master of all creation and destruction, Azathoth. Hey everyone, what's up and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. The voice you are currently listening today belongs to me, Lindsay Ivan, your voice of reason for today's video, which is what if Azathoth existed today? But before I begin, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Life's Biggest Questions. With that being said, let's dive on into the video. Now, the first recorded mention of Azathoth was in a note Lovecraft wrote to himself in 1919. It read, "Azathoth, hideous name." Wow, very inspiring. Azathoth officially first appeared in the 1922 unfinished short story titled, well, Azathoth. From there, he went on to be mentioned and appeared in multiple other Lovecraft stories. The most notable one would probably be The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. Now, Azathoth is quite terrifying. In fact, there's no definitive description of him. Everybody imagines him differently. He can look like anything and everything. And his description and appearance is always changing. In the 1931 novel, The Whisperer in Darkness, he's referred to as the monstrous nuclear chaos beyond angled space. Nuclear referring to the nucleus of the cosmos. So interpretations of this state that he is a mass that can be found outside of the universe. Now, what happens if Azathoth existed today? Well, life as we know it would be changed forever. Azathoth is the lord of all things. It is said that he is the creator of all things in the universe, but he simply does not know it. In fact, he is fast asleep. That's right. What's so scary about a dude that's just sleeping the whole time? Well, our life depends upon this. He is dreaming up our world and our reality. If he wakes up, we would all be gone. He is super powerful. He literally has created life as we know it, but he is completely blind to this fact since he's sleeping. So we only exist in Azathoth's dreams, meaning that if he existed today, all it takes is him to wake up and we would all be gone. I mean, okay, that's not so bad. We would be gone pretty fast. It wouldn't be a painful experience at all. But still, I'd rather that not happen. Now, no need to worry. To ensure he is never woken up, he is constantly surrounded by alien servants that keep him asleep by their sounds of pipes and drums. But we're basically screwed if he ever wakes up from his deep slumber. We would be gone in an instant. Now, I feel like if us mortals knew about his existence, then this would cause mass fear and hysteria. People would know that any day he could just wake up and we would all be wiped out. As a result, the crime rate may increase with people thinking that they can do whatever they want and just blame it on Azathoth, saying, well, he dreamt of me doing it. Which is a really trippy concept when you think about it, like he created us, but he's not controlling every single one of us. Or is he? Anyways, there would just be so much panic. People would wake up every day wondering if it would be their last. But maybe in a weird, twisted way, this would be good for us. It would teach us to value everything that we have and the time that we have. We wouldn't take things for granted and maybe we would try and do something new each day, maybe even be more adventurous, because we wouldn't know when our life would be cut short. Moving on, if Azathoth existed, of course, you would have the researchers out there that would try to find ways to permanently sedate Azathoth to really ensure that he never wakes up. Don't know how this would be possible, but I'm sure people would try anyways. But I could see the attempts backfiring badly. Then you would probably have those people that are so fascinated by him and they become die-hard fans. You'll probably see several Azathoth cults where they worship him and make sacrifices on his behalf. Again, are we really in control of what we do, or is Azathoth controlling our every move as well? In that case, he would be dreaming about people making a cult about him. It's such a trippy concept. And of course, you'll probably have some sort of doomsday cult with members that will deliberately try to wake up this sleeping creature so that they could end life. You'll have people fighting back against them, ensuring that they don't do this, which could result in violent outbreaks. Now, on a more lighter note, if Azathoth existed and he never woke up from his sleep, then we may just never be affected by him. We would be able to live our lives normally. I mean, he is so uninvolved and unaware of the role he plays in our existence. He doesn't consciously manipulate our universe and force bad things to happen to us. So potentially we would be safe and just live a normal life. But here's a much darker theory. Other people claim that when he shifts and moves in his sleep, this has the power to wipe out galaxies completely. So basically, we would be living in such an unpredictable world. Just a little shift in his sleep and it could completely disrupt our universe. He completely interferes with the laws of physics, meaning our world could face significant and unpredictable changes even if he never woke up. So, to recap, let's hope that Azathoth never comes into existence, because the outcome would not be good. We would be living in a very unpredictable, anxiety-filled world. This dude has the power to destroy us in a second, and he doesn't even know it. Life as we know it, your family, friends, history, everything would be gone in a matter of seconds.
Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat, half remembering a dream you absolutely couldn't explain? Maybe there was an inexplicable landscape full of strange architecture covered in unrecognizable surfaces. Or perhaps there was a monster, a gigantic beast in silhouette, only explainable in segments. If these are familiar experiences, you might have been visited by the depths dweller himself, Cthulhu. Worry not, you won't suffer long. If he's reaching out like that, the end times are nigh anyway. Or maybe it was just a nightmare brought on by bad takeout. Who's to say? Let's rule that out for a moment and consider what the world might be like if the dreamer did indeed exist. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're going to be considering the following question: what if Cthulhu existed today? Before we begin, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more tentacled terror. Outstanding! Let's get started. Now, Cthulhu is one of the better known figures from H.P. Lovecraft's collective works. In fact, he might be more popular than his creator at this point. While those interested in cosmic horror likely know H.P. quite well at this point, the general media-consuming public likely recognizes the name Cthulhu. Most folks are aware that he's a tentacle-covered giant demigod of sorts, which is mostly right, I suppose. Now, there are plenty of Cthulhu explainer videos out there these days, so I'll trust you to do some digging if you need additional context. For the purposes of this video, I'll trust that most people sort of know about cosmic horror, and even if you don't, I'll drop assorted facts throughout to make sure we're all generally on the same page. So let's ask the big question: what if Cthulhu existed today? It's not too far-fetched to say he likely does. See, Cthulhu was once above the water, roaming the world like any great old one might. However, these days he seems to be slumbering eternal beneath the Pacific, dreaming in his underwater city of Relaya. For argument's sake, we can claim that there isn't a 0% chance that Cthulhu is dwelling in the depths, never to be found by the average human. If we take that at face value, we can say with some degree of confidence that if Cthulhu existed today, not much would change. The world would still turn, people would still live their lives, dogs would still chase squirrels, the works. However, that is the simplest possible answer. It's easy to say that if Cthulhu existed, he would just continue sleeping. But there's a lot more to consider when a great old one exists. See, Cthulhu inspired many devoted followers. So devoted, you might even call them cultists. And these cultists formed groups and congregations and sewing circles, and these folks organized together and formed bigger cults. Cults devoted to worshipping Cthulhu and attempting to bring him out of his eternal slumber. As a great old one, Cthulhu once knew all that was occurring in the universe. He understood things that humans could never hope to understand. The basis of cosmic horror indeed. However, Cthulhu was willing to share some of this knowledge for a price. Before being relegated to the underwater city, he would communicate with chosen people through dreams. Through doing so, he established his cult. Word spread and cells popped up all over the world. It became so prevalent that even when he was trapped under the sea, his worshippers continued to worship. You see, the ocean is deep and vast, which makes it hard for even a godlike creature such as Cthulhu to transmit his messages. The telepathic communication has been weakened, meaning that only rarely does a message make it to the surface. That doesn't slow the cult down one bit, though. The cells of worshippers continue to congregate around the world, best known for their practice of chanting. Over and over again, they will say the ancient and unknowable words. In his house at Relaya, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. This can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, but most of the time people assume that it means he's waiting for his followers to wake him up. It's been said, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. So Cthulhu isn't dead, at least not in any way that matters. And death apparently isn't the end, which allows for a lovely Cthulhu awakening to be in the cards. This quasi-immortality might actually be a draw for many of his worshippers too. If Cthulhu can live forever, why wouldn't he be able to grant that to his followers, right? That might actually be the case if you look at some different accounts of his followers. Human leaders of his cult appear to be immortal in some cases, drawing on dark and arcane powers to extend their life far beyond the span of a regular person. In doing so, they also inspire others to follow Cthulhu with promises of similar power being granted somewhere down the line. Eternal life tends to get a lot of people interested in worship, huh? And it's not just humans that benefit from this either. If you take a trip to the murky depths just outside of Innsmouth, you'll find all sorts of deep ones. These freakish aquatic humanoids also worship Cthulhu, and the biggest and baddest of them seem to live and grow forever. Even after reaching maturity, their size increases. They also tend to come ashore and mate with humans, creating strange halflings equally devoted to the terrifying dreamer. To summarize what we've discussed so far, if Cthulhu existed today, we'd have a lot more cultists and a lot more immortality, and probably some crazy gigantic aquatic beasts. That's pretty fun, right? Of course, these results only happen if he remains asleep at the bottom of the ocean. If he were to awaken, it would be a whole other story. There are a few different ways this could happen too. I think that one that a bunch of people might be familiar with involves a spiteful fat kid and some superhero cosplay.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are pleased to announce the successful merger of Cthulhu and the King. Cthulhu's track record for complete dominance and interdimensionary rule is without question.
Definitely not canon or anything close to it, but there was a story arc in a season of South Park where an oil drilling company releases Cthulhu for a period of time. Cartman then decides that he can manipulate the Great Old One, as he does with all the other people in his life, and begins waging war on the things he believes are evil. Then Mintberry Crunch comes in and sends Cthulhu back to where he came from. Again, definitely not how it would really play out, but it's an interesting take on how Cthulhu might enter our realm. And it actually does sort of stick to the story from the Call of Cthulhu. In H.P. Lovecraft's tale concerning the Cults Creeps, a ship full of sailors actually manages to open a portal to the underwater city, so not too far off in terms of the whole summoning bit. And of course, the summoning is just the beginning. Once Cthulhu enters our world, it's all over. Without deep sleep and deeper waters keeping his legendary telepathic powers at bay, Cthulhu would be more powerful than we could ever understand. He'd subjugate Earth in a matter of moments, with members of his cult being rewarded for their loyalty, and heathens being enslaved or killed instantly. It would all be too much for our tiny human brains. Classic cosmic horror, right? The introduction of Cthulhu into our world also implies a whole lot of other cosmic beings as well. Cthulhu is the figurehead in what is known as the Cthulhu mythos, a series of tales by assorted authors about cosmic entities in the same universe as the Great Slumberer. Without getting too deep into it, we'd also likely be introduced to his progeny, Gathanatoa, Yathagtha, Zothamog, and Cthulhu, his mates, Idhya and Kasagtha, his siblings, Hastur, Cathanid, and Nraku, and his ancestors, Yog-Sothoth and Shub-Niggurath. All of these beings come with their own set of troubles. Yog-Sothoth might father another half-cosmic, half-human child, like in the Dunwich Horror. Gathanathoa might freeze some folks like Medusa, but leave their minds to rot in an immobile shell for all of eternity. Maybe Hastur would leave the yellow sign all over for hapless folks to stumble upon and become indoctrinated by. So many opportunities in this mythos, so little hope for humanity. The world would be a much darker, much more mysterious place if Cthulhu existed today. I'm sure plenty of investigative journalists and scholars would try to infiltrate the cult and find more info too. Of course, this would come with its own slew of horrors and misfortunes. How is a writer supposed to explain their encounter with an indescribable being? Maybe we'd get some video footage of true horror. Although who's to say you can even capture any of it on video? And that just about brings us to our conclusion. If Cthulhu existed today, we'd see an uptick in cult activity, maybe even immortality. If he were to awaken, we'd all be screwed, no question about it. There's also a lot of room for other beings from the Cthulhu mythos to appear. All in all, we'd be terrified a whole lot more often. What do you think? Would you join in on the chanting, or would you just run away? Would a Cthulhu-filled world be better or worse than what we have now? Maybe an outside force is just what we need to feel alive again.
Hey guys, Jared Bronstein here, and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. Today we'll be talking about one of the great old ones. This thing is such a power entity, it's been dubbed the Unspeakable One, him who is not to be named, among other things, including HASTUR. Now before we explore the question, what if HASTUR was real, make sure to subscribe to our channel, click that bell to be notified of other videos, and share this video with a Lovecraft fan. Alright, so HASTUR. Well, although many do believe Lovecraft created this monstrous god, if that's what we could define it as, he actually first appeared in the short story Haisha the Shepherd by Ambrose Bierce in 1893. HASTUR was actually quite harmless in Bierce's short story. However, it seems Lovecraft took inspiration from this and turned HASTUR into a much more menacing monster. Although only briefly mentioned in his work, HASTUR is believed to have that of a cult following and a deep hatred for Cthulhu, his half-brother. So with this in mind, let's now explore what would happen if HASTUR was indeed real. Being considered an elder god or great old one, HASTUR would most definitely take over the world. With his cult-like following, I think it's safe to say HASTUR would create an army of his own that would make things very simple for the human race. Follow the rules set out by the new ruler or emperor of the world, or perish. Now, it's unclear what HASTUR's true intentions are. If we go by Lovecraft's version, it's also unclear what HASTUR is. Is it a he? Or is it a place? Is it an object? Of course, the ambiguity of this creature is what makes it so compelling. But for this video, let's say HASTUR is a godlike creature with evil intentions. So how would this affect our world as we know it? Again, it really depends what powers HASTUR has. Can he control our minds, or does he infect a certain group of people who then worship him as a god and try to conform others or kill? I think that's a good route to go, so let's keep moving forward. With HASTUR having an army or a cult-like following on Earth, it would really be a worldwide problem. Those with other religious beliefs would most likely argue the idea that there is a greater god out there. This would cause a divide among people more so than there already is. However, assuming the people who worship HASTUR are less human than anyone else, it may bring the rest of the world together. The idea here is that those who worship HASTUR would almost be possessed in a way. In HASTUR the Shepherd, HASTUR is literally a god of shepherds. This leads me to believe those who do follow his religion, or cult of sorts, would be just that, sheep. And with this sheep or herd mentality, they would all follow the same rules and have the same goals. Now, of course, I'm not saying that his followers would legitimately be sheep. I'm saying they'd have that sheep herd mentality. In this case, it would be converting the rest of the world to embrace and praise the Great One, HASTUR. Now, of course, these people wouldn't have a superpower of any kind. It'd be very similar to that of the Manson cult. However, these people, just like those who followed Charles Manson, could be quite violent and dangerous. Identical to that of a godlike figure, the presence of HASTUR would really depend on those who believe and to what degree. Especially considering how open-ended the idea of HASTUR is, there could be extremists and those who just somewhat believe in his presence. This too could cause an issue even between these two types of people. Would people be sacrificed in the name of HASTUR, or would it be sheep instead? Again, completely open-ended and up for interpretation, depending on the beliefs of those who look to this thing as a newly founded god. There's no telling what behaviors or even ceremonies these people would carry out. My name is HASTUR, I am god of all. There's also the idea of summoning, which brings us back to the sacrifice. At first, when someone were to stumble upon the remains of this ritual, it would certainly open an investigation of sorts. But at that point, it may be too late. If those who follow this godlike figure were able to summon him into the world, there's no saying how much destruction he could cause. Given the powers he has, that make him undefeatable. If the physical being of HASTUR was summoned onto the earth, it would quite literally be a hell on earth for those who don't believe or worship, most likely leading to their death or forever worshipping a god they didn't originally believe in. It's safe to say it would be a day of reckoning. That is, of course, if the physical being was to be summoned onto earth. If not, and he was just a godlike figure that was never seen by anyone, this too could be quite costly. Not to say he has powers of sorts, but those who believe would of course need a walking god of sorts to lead their rituals or services. The way other religions have priests or rabbis, the cult of HASTUR would certainly have a physical being be the leader on earth. This person may be the one holding this cult together, or simply just a figure in place of the real god that can easily be replaced once they die. Ultimately, there are many ways the world could be affected if HASTUR was real. If he was a physical being, there's no doubt he would overtake the world and make everyone his slaves or kill them. However, if he was just an ambiguous being or a godlike type that were to be worshipped, it's very likely a cult following would be started, and those who worshipped may carry out various different rituals, summonings, and sacrifices to try to please their new god. Ultimately, it would just mean another religion would be introduced to society, and it wouldn't necessarily change the world as we know it, but what those that worship do may be questionable. People may be at risk of being attacked by those in this cult, which eventually would see the worshippers arrested and sentenced for their crimes. With all that being said, this could also quite possibly mean the likes of Cthulhu, among other godlike creatures, may also be real. If this were the case, well, there would be complete chaos on Earth. With these evil beings and figures ruling our world, going at war with each other, there's no way anyone would necessarily survive the massacre that would be the fight between these unearthly gods. Of course, there would also be cults praising these other gods, and it would just be a whole nightmare for everyone, really. Now, thankfully, this is all fiction. The works of H.P. Lovecraft will always be fan favorites and will live on until the end of time, but all in our minds, of course. That's what makes his work so intriguing to many. There's no real right or wrong. He left his stories so open-ended, it allows the mind to do what it does. Wander.
Howard Phillips Lovecraft has been credited with the creation of some of the most existentially terrifying beings of all time. Merely catching a glimpse of these abominations would be enough to send a person of average fortitude into the awful depths of eternal madness. Some are so far beyond our comprehension, it would be impossible to even imagine interacting with them. The mind-rending would happen so quickly we wouldn't even know it hit us. However, there is one outer god who is more tangible to the common human, and the way he would play with our mortal souls is potentially far more horrible than anything Cthulhu or Azathoth could throw our way. Nyarlathotep, the most human of Lovecraft's creations, would much rather see you suffer instead of simply eviscerating your brain and body. Hello my fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your disembodied voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're posing the following proposition. What if Nyarlathotep was alive today? Before we get started, make sure to give us a big thumbs up down below and subscribe if you want more terrifying content. Let's get started. First, a quick overview of the terror that is Nyarlathotep. The skinless one, the faceless god, the dweller in darkness, the crawling chaos. A shapeshifter with thousands of forms and just as many names, Nyarlathotep plagues all who come close with vivid and endless nightmares. Unlike many of the other Lovecraftian gods, he is free to roam the earth as he pleases. Despite all the horrific forms he embodies, Nyarlathotep is considered to be the most human of the outer gods. This humanity is actually the trait that makes him so terrifying. He is a manipulative mastermind of human pain and misery. Cruel and sadistic, Nyarlathotep takes pleasure in driving humans insane. As son of Azathoth, he has the power to destroy our world. However, it seems as though he wants to stick around and cause more chaos. He just wants to watch the world burn. Now that we're all up to date on what we're dealing with here, I have some ideas as to what would happen if he were alive and kicking on planet Earth today. The first thing Nyarlathotep would do is amass countless followers to do his bidding. He's been known to do this in the past, like in the H.P. Lovecraft short story bearing his name as the title. In this story, Nyarlathotep takes the form of a man who looks like an Egyptian pharaoh and roams the earth, gathering legions of followers through demonstrations of seemingly magical feats. After convincing enough people to join him, the world collapses, with nothing and no one left not under his control. I would say that he wouldn't need to use magic to gain followers today. He wouldn't even have to roam. Instead, being the crafty trickster he is, Nyarlathotep would use the power of the internet to amass followers left and right. He would use YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, forums, and much more to find and brainwash millions of people into doing his bidding. These folks would become brainless automatons and do whatever he wished. His shape-shifting abilities would make this much easier as well, as he could take the form of different people to reach new audiences. He could also use new servants and speak through them on many platforms to ensure that all avenues are being utilized at all times. Anyone not convinced at first would eventually have their trusted sources replaced with followers of Nyarlathotep slinging lies and deceit. Common sense can't prevail against insurmountable odds, unfortunately. People believe anything they hear online anyways. Hell, I could be an embodiment of Nyarlathotep and you wouldn't even know it. He'd even get your tech-illiterate grandparents on his side. The internet is one way for him to amass followers, but he would eventually connive his way onto TV channels too. That kind of influence is unparalleled, especially when Graham doesn't know how to change the channel. I don't think he would stop at just video content either. Soon enough, he would have his slimy tendrils infiltrating every aspect of pop culture. Musicians, athletes, authors, even doctors would spread his serpentine lies. No media or information on Earth would escape his tainted influence. Once the crawling chaos deems his followers to be plentiful enough, he would begin infiltrating positions of power and using his influence to fundamentally change the way the world works. At this point, he would have the means to take over any position of power he wants. Any person standing in his way would be assimilated or driven mad. Political opponents, public dissenters, major protesters, they would all be visited by the faceless god himself in one of his many sanity-shattering forms. Upon being driven mad, they would be reported as suffering breakdowns from excessive stress or falling ill. Just another reason not to stand against the Dark One. Purposefully bad policy decisions would be made with the express purpose of pitting people against each other. Meaningfully divisive laws, unfair rules, conflicts started under false pretenses. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? All of these decisions would have the appropriate propaganda to back them up, as Nyarlathotep is known to be a master propagandist. As much as we'd like to believe otherwise, nobody is immune to propaganda. All of this would culminate in massive human misery and a great deal more folks falling under the influence of the Dweller in Darkness. After a little while, he wouldn't even have to put in effort. We usually do this kind of stuff without help from a cosmic being. A little push from an outer god and society starts to topple. Now, once all this starts to roll along, it would be time for step 3 of the evil plan. Drive all remaining humans to madness and begin the downfall of humanity. People tend to look for leadership when things are going bad. So as society starts to crumble, the populace will look to those in positions of power for help. Too bad. Nyarlathotep has taken over all the positions of power. I can see it now. A press conference is called to address the mounting issues facing our modern society. Millions have tuned in to see what possibly could be done and are waiting with bated breath. The world leader takes the stage and steps up to the podium. He looks out to the audience, draws in a deep breath, and explodes into a massive writhing abomination with countless eyes, legs, mouths, and other nameless extremities. At this point, most people will be driven mad, and the rest will be convinced that it's the end of days. We'd be convinced that all the bad things we've done up until this point have culminated into an apocalyptic scenario, and it's all our fault. Nothing left to do but give in to the existential dread. Screams of pain and terror fill the night sky as Nyarlathotep revels in our collective realization. And he wouldn't just watch us tear ourselves apart at this point. Oh no. He, as a massively powerful shapeshifter, would make use of these abilities to make the process so much more painful. He would call upon the powers of the outer gods and use them himself to torment and torture the last inhabitants. The spread of madness is one of Nyarlathotep's greatest pleasures. At some point among this chaotic purge, Nyarlathotep would likely get bored. Hard to believe, I know, but he would. Huge swaths of people would die, and eventually madness would run its course. There are only so many things people can do while mad before they just become husks of their former selves. At that point, what else is there for Nyarlathotep to do? Just toy with the equivalent of human dolls? That's no fun. So at this point, why not just destroy the entire planet? Go out with a bang. As the outer god known best for doing the bidding of other outer gods, he'd probably take it upon himself to summon some of his cosmic creators to the earthly plane. They would come forth from their forbidden dimension and have a ball annihilating whatever's left. Although I'm sure humans would have done a pretty good job of breaking everything already. When there's nothing left to wreck, I suppose it's time to say goodbye to the planet as a whole. Into the void it shall go, lost to time and space.
JORMUNGANDR. What a name. In Norse mythology, it's believed this name means huge monster. Other sources claim it translates to Earth's necklace. Both would be valid when describing this humongous serpent, which is said to be so long it could literally wrap around the Earth and still not be fully extended. Yes, this thing is quite large. Some claim it is a snake, while others say it is a dragon. However, it seems the most common myth paints this guy as a snake, so we'll roll with that. And it's possibly the biggest beast in Norse mythology, so this is going to be a fun one. What's going down, guys? Welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your host, Jared Bronstein, and today we'll be exploring the idea, what if JORMUNGANDR was real? As always, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of our videos, and drop us some comments below with other questions you may have. I'll be replying to some comments to wrap this video up, but for now we need to get talking about Norse mythology, more specifically, this terrifying beast known as JORMUNGANDR. So as previously mentioned, some say it's a dragon, some say it's a snake, but one thing is certain, it's a serpent of some kind. The child of Loki, the god of chaos, and his mistress, the giant Angrboda, it seems JORMUNGANDR has taken its parents' best qualities, making it a large, vicious being who simply enjoys chaos. Aside from its body being long enough to wrap around Earth, JORMUNGANDR also has an incredibly large mouth filled with venom-dripping teeth. And this thing is known to have the ability to swallow giants and gods whole. So clearly us humans wouldn't really have much of a chance if we had to fight this thing. Now thankfully, if JORMUNGANDR was real, that wouldn't be the case. You see, JORMUNGANDR was known to have quite the rivalry with a god by the name of Thor. You might know of him, there's been a few movies made with him being the protagonist of the film. And as terrifying as it would be knowing that there is a large snake who's said to live below the ocean, the size of Earth just waiting the day it can wake up and destroy Earth and all of humanity, we also need to consider this. If JORMUNGANDR is real, that means the other Norse gods are real. And I'm not going to make this entire video explaining what life would be like if Norse gods were real. because we actually did a video on that not too long ago. So go check that out for a more in-depth understanding of Norse gods. But in a short summary, what I'm saying here is, if one exists, then so does the other. Meaning, if Jormungandr was sleeping in the bottom of the ocean, and somehow someway was bothered, inevitably waking it up from this slumber, Earth wouldn't necessarily be doomed. Of course, the second this thing comes up from the water, tsunamis would most likely destroy a few continents. Not countries, entire continents. We need to consider that this thing rising from the ocean would make waves the size of, I don't even know what. I mean, it's bigger than Earth, so use your imagination. But before this thing was even able to get to the surface to even try to attack Earth, Thor would most likely step in and battle on behalf of the human race. Jormungandr and Thor have quite a history with each other, which actually ended with the two of them dying. During the Battle of Ragnarok, as per Norse mythology, Thor successfully defeated Jormungandr, only to ultimately die from being poisoned by the serpent's venom. So in a sense, if Jormungandr was real, well, we wouldn't even know because Thor would have already killed it. Essentially what I'm saying is that according to Norse mythology, all of this already did happen, which means in fact, not only were Thor and Jormungandr real, but so were all the other gods, including Loki. And if this is the case, well then what would this mean for other religions and people who pray to other gods? Does that mean that they too are real, or is this proof in a sense that there is only one real religion or gods that everyone should be worshipping? That is something that would need to be decided by each individual person, which would depend on how strong their belief is in said religion. But if these gods are real and once upon a time a battle broke out as epic as this would have been, well, I don't think it would just stop there. Even though this is said to have taken place in the 13th century, how do we know that the planet of Asgard, where all the gods met, still doesn't exist? It can't be seen by any mortal man, meaning you and I would never even know it existed in the first place. Now personally, I'm not a very religious guy, and as I said before, it all depends on your personal belief. But the same way people worship a god they can't physically see, why is it so far-fetched to believe there is a planet in the sky we can't see but exists? Which also begs the question, how do we know when, if at all, these gods will go to battle again? But going with this angle, under the impression that we can't see Asgard in the sky, but it exists, how would we be able to see any of the other gods, or in this case, Thor or Jormungandr? Essentially what I'm saying is, if any of Norse mythology was real, we wouldn't be able to see it in the first place. So if Jormungandr was in fact real, we wouldn't even know. Not to say this battle would go down in an alternate reality, it's very possible it does happen in our universe and possibly on Earth, but we wouldn't actually see the fight. What we could see, however, is natural disasters. Heavy thunderstorms caused by Thor, tsunamis caused by Jormungandr coming up from the depths of the ocean. To us, these would just be a regular occurrence and Mother Nature doing its thing. But in reality, it'd be a battle between a couple epic, larger-than-life gods.
Cosmic horror. The stuff of legend, the terror you could never hope to understand. Formless, shapeless, ageless, these are the beasts that cannot be stopped, cannot even be slowed. In fact, they can't even be effectively compared to anything other than other cosmic creatures. Such is the life of a Lovecraftian atrocity. And of course, what could be scarier than a monster that knows everything that you could never hope to know anything about? Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're asking a question that will bring answers that we can only see the gauzy, shadowy outlines of. What if Azathoth was alive today? We've discussed the implications of him existing in the past, and now we're trying to figure out what kind of impact he would make floating about in 2020. The consequences would indeed be heavy. Before we get started here, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more Lovecraftian inquiry. Outstanding, let's begin. If you're unfamiliar with Azathoth, fret not, I'll do my best to get you up to speed as soon as possible. Born of the nameless mist, he is a cosmic entity and outer god. He exists far outside the confines of Earth and the solar system, even thought of as being outside the universe itself. Any influence felt from Azathoth is coming from way far off, and any instance folks lay eyes upon is only a small representation of the true being. As such, he tends to appear in many different ways. Depending on the author depicting this entity, he can appear as a mass of glowing orbs, a tentacle-covered atrocity, a clump of eyes and other fleshy bits, and more. Again, all of these could be correct depictions, representations of different parts of Azathoth manifesting in various parts of the universe. On the topic of the universe, you should probably also know that Azathoth can see all of it, all the time, for all eternity. All at once. There's no hiding secrets from him, so don't even try. A quote from the Dunwich Horror, a story where Azathoth plays a major role, reads, "Azathoth knows the gate. Azathoth is the gate. Azathoth is the key and the guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Azathoth. He knows where the old ones broke through of old, and where they shall break through again. He knows where they have trod earth's fields, and where they still tread them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. If it's happened, or will happen, you can count on Azathoth knowing all about it. Even old ones can't escape his all-seeing eyes. Seeing all this stuff provides Mistress Azathoth with plenty of knowledge, and he isn't too shy about sharing it. You would think an outer god might be above providing us lowly humans with information, but you'd be wrong. If you know the right incantations and rituals and other assorted rites, it's possible to summon him. Doing so can result in a lot of different things. Some folks want assistance in performing occult deeds or rituals, like resurrecting folks from the dead. Others want to bring forth additional monstrosities into the world through the impregnation of human females with cosmic beings. If you've read the Dunwich Horror, you'll recognize that move. Some people reach out to Yagi just to learn forbidden secrets of the universe. However, as we are insignificant, primitive beings, the knowledge gained in these exchanges is probably not good. Most mortals are driven mad by Azathoth's presence, and those with enough fortitude to withstand that will be likely sent to the loony bin by whatever knowledge is imparted. If by some miracle the scholar of the dark arts can withstand all of the above, then they can use it to cause disaster. Because what else would you do with cosmic knowledge? Build a hospital? Give to charity? Solve world hunger? No. Destruction and the flaying of minds. Of course, acquiring knowledge like this means that you've got to make some sacrifices, like your ever-living soul or a whole bunch of human lives. You know the deal. So now we have an abridged version of the general shape of knowledge surrounding Azathoth. All-knowing, outside our universe, willing to share some forbidden knowledge in exchange for a few cracked eggs, progenitor of Cthulhu, HASTUR, Wilbur Whately. Very nice. But what if Yogchamp was alive today? What would happen if the lurker at the threshold spent some time in our mortal realm? Well, a whole lot of chaos would unfold, that's for sure. If we look to the Dunwich Horror for an example of what could happen, it becomes apparent that all sorts of antisocial folks are born from him. Wilbur Whately appears human at first, but grows much faster than any other human. He also appears to have no problem sacrificing family members and is actively looking to bring forth some cosmic terrors through the door. Not necessarily the kind of person you want walking around in the waking civilized world. His brother, the thing in the barn, is more akin to a cosmic terror than Wilbur. Fed entire cows every day for months and growing to the size of a farmhouse, if left unchecked, this thing could have raised Dunwich in no time. Thankfully, some well-read and well-prepared scholars were there to stop it. One of the creature-fighting crew goes into shock while pursuing it, but they still get the job done. Nice. Good work, team. But the story took place in and around 1928. It was a lot easier to cover up stories back then, and information wasn't as readily available. If Azathoth was around these days pulling stunts like this, we'd be in for a lot of trouble. Firstly, a giant barn-sized creature would not go unnoticed. Somebody would snap a pic or record some video, and soon the whole world would be at attention. Some would try to debunk it, but others would be interested in the origins of such a creature. And off they would go, trying to find a way to summon a creature of their very own. It's likely they would succeed too. Wilbur would have likely taken his search for a Necronomicon to the internet, letting all sorts of interested folk know about the process itself. And seeing that Azathoth exists everywhere all at once, he would be able to accommodate all sorts of lunatics and occultists performing rituals and seeking forbidden knowledge. Soon enough, we'd be seeing a massive uptick in human sacrifice, minds being torn asunder, and barn-sized beasts rolling through small towns. Small towns would just be the beginning, too. There aren't enough responsible scholars out there these days to take care of so many monstrosities. And even if they were, would they be well equipped enough? What would likely happen then is a massive conflict between Lovecraft-inspired lunatics and folks just trying to uphold the fabric of reality. Azathoth would continue to present effective ritualists with cosmic weapons while the whole world trembled. Eventually, other old ones would be summoned through the door, and the world would become a much slimier, more tentacly place. It's hard to predict what would happen next. Mass hysteria, widespread madness, the end of every recognizable thing on Earth? Who would be around to judge? What a world. And that about sums it up. If Azathoth was around today, word would get around quickly. All sorts of Dunwich horrors would crop up and the folks would pretty much go mad across the board. Then the world would be forever altered. Good luck to everyone out there. What do you think? Would it play out differently? Maybe someone would come up with a way to prevent the widespread lunacy. Or maybe it would be good for everyone, considering how crazy things seem these days anyway. Let me know what you're thinking down in the comments.
Hey guys, how's it going? Jared Bronstein here, and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. Today we'll be talking about the great CTHULHU, an old one whose appearance, behavior, and all-around being depends on which version you're talking about. Before we get into it, make sure to subscribe, click the bell icon to never miss a video, and let me know in the comments below which Lovecraft creature is your favorite. And now let's dive into it and explore our world if we were fearing the great old one, CTHULHU. There's the original written by Clark Ashton Smith, who describes CTHULHU as the following. He was very squat and pot-bellied, his head was more like a monstrous toad than a deity, and his whole body was covered with an imitation of short fur, giving somehow a vague sensation of both the bat and the sloth. His sleepy eyelids were half lowered over his globular eyes. The tip of a queer tongue issued from his fat mouth. Smith's version was also referred to as sloth-like in the Seven Geeses, as explained in the following passage. You shall note CTHULHU by his great girth and his bat-like furriness, and the look of a sleepy black toad, which he has eternally. He will rise not from his place, even in the ravening of hunger, but will wait in divine slothfulness for the sacrifice. Lovecraft's version is somewhat similar, however HP decided to move away from the sloth and bat-like references. More specifically, Lovecraft refers to CTHULHU as a toad-like god who can morph or mold itself depending on its circumstances. Either way, if this old god did exist, one thing is for sure, it'd be quite powerful. However, it may not be as much of a danger to society as we'd like to think. The true form of CTHULHU is incomprehensible to the human eye, but as previously mentioned, we perceived it as a giant toad-like creature with bat and sloth features as well. The only main difference between Lovecraft and Smith's version is the transformation and lack of sloth and bat-like appearances. Other than that, they're mostly the same entity. And as scary of a monster as it may be, it seems CTHULHU's laziness would be the reason we wouldn't have much to worry about. More specifically, CTHULHU is apparently so lazy it won't go after victims. Instead, even if it's being starved to death, CTHULHU will wait for a sacrifice so it doesn't need to get up. It may sound silly, but this is what we're dealing with here, guys. According to CTHULHU's history, it resides in the depths of Earth. More specifically, in Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, CTHULHU lives in Nikai, which is an underground cave beneath Oklahoma in the United States. But if this thing were living below Oklahoma, it's not like all the residents of the state would be in imminent danger. As previously mentioned, CTHULHU is extremely lazy and will wait to get a sacrifice before it hunts for its own victims. So it wouldn't really take over the state, nor would it try to take over the entire country. Really, CTHULHU being a real entity wouldn't affect us as much as we may think, aside from the fact that, of course, people may try to explore the dangerous land that CTHULHU calls home, in which they'd most likely become his sacrifice. There's also the realistic possibility that we'd want to study this godlike creature. Where did it come from? Well, technically space, and it lived on Saturn at one point. So does that make this great old one an alien? Yes, depending who you ask. We'd certainly want to know more about CTHULHU, and this could lead to many casualties and money wasted. With the presence of CTHULHU, well, that must mean that the other great old ones, such as Cthulhu, would certainly exist in our world as well. This would most definitely be problematic, considering most of H.P. Lovecraft's work, if not all, revolves around these monstrous creatures that have godlike abilities. Put simply, if all of H.P. Lovecraft's creations, or at least monsters that he has incorporated into his magical world, were real, we would certainly be doomed. Specifically speaking on CTHULHU, well, it appears that we're not in much danger. CTHULHU is lazy and apparently quite slow. It lives in the depths of the earth that no one would be able to go to and survive. But it seems CTHULHU being a part of our world inevitably means there are other godly creatures that we would certainly be no match for. All in all, we'd either end up slaves to some of these gods or dead. Not sure which fate I'd rather have, probably the latter. Now, of course, before we wrap up, as always, I got some comment replies. But before we do that, let me know in the comments below which one of Lovecraft's creations, or at least stories that he's adapted, you enjoy the most. I've always been a fan of Cthulhu, but truthfully don't know much else of Lovecraft's work. Either way, Cthulhu will always have a place in my heart.
Hello internet and welcome back to the most inquisitive channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions, that cosmic place between reality and endless sleep, where we worship our one true queen, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young. Come on guys, she's great, really. What's going on, question is, as always, I'll be your host Jack Finch as we pledge our eternal servitude to the great old ones and outer gods alike and nonchalantly ask the question, what if Shub-Niggurath was real? Roll the clip.
Yeah, Shub-Niggurath. black goat of the woods, blessed be us, your faithful servants, the destroyers of light.
Fear not, guys, this video is anything but fractured, and while we'll be relying on some pretty legit canonical sources to paint ourselves a picture of a world where Shub-Niggurath is warmly smiled upon more so than the Queen of England herself. Before you do that though, you know how it goes, guys. If you're a fan of this video, H.P. Lovecraft, or the worship of abyssal cosmic entities, then go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, and make sure to hit that subscribe bell so you can stay up to date with our latest and greatest uploads. Also, why don't you go ahead and share it with a friend or potential Cthulhu cultist so you can disseminate the spread of eldritch influence in a much more efficient manner. Now, it's no deep mystery that the works of H.P. Lovecraft have inspired an entire school of thought in horror. The idea of a great, twisted, writhing beast of such immense grotesqueness and infinite cosmic power that the human mind can't even begin to comprehend their inner workings, and are thus driven to complete and utter madness. Still though, that hasn't stopped hordes of fictional zealots making it their life's work to usher in the reign of Great Old One and Outer God alike. None of these are more beloved than Shub-Niggurath herself, like a weird, twisted, ginormous Taylor Swift, capturing the hearts and minds of bright young budding cultists the entire universe over. Really, she's great. Don't judge a book by its cover. Shub, let's call her Shub, it's got a ring to it, first appeared in 1928's The Last Test, a short story that was published in the Weird Tales anthology series. Since that first appearance, her legend had grown like a mighty meaty seed and sprawled its tentacles across all facets of the Lovecraft mythos, being picked up by more recent authors such as August Derleth, Lynn Carter and Brian Lumley. In all seriousness, they can't get enough of our cosmic queen in waiting. Shub-Niggurath is an outer god that also goes by the name the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young. She is a perverse fertility deity said to appear as an evil cloud-like entity. She's an enormous mass extruding black fleshy tentacles, slime-dripping mouths and short, writhing goat legs. As a bonus, small creatures are continually spat forth from her maw, which are either consumed into the miasmatic form or escape to be some offshoot monstrous life form elsewhere in the universe. Out of all of the Lovecraftian deities, Shub-Niggurath is undoubtedly the most extensively worshipped. Her hit list includes the Hyperboreans, the Movians, the Tuog of Kana, that's got a ring to it, the people of the planet Sarnath, and an uncountable number of primitive druidic and barbaric cults across the cosmos, including Earth. She's so beloved that even non-humanoid lifeforms worship her, the Migo, a fungal-based species, and the Nugsoth, an insectoid, almost reptilian race. What's great about Shub is that she's so accessible and doesn't discriminate on who or what can possibly meet the parameters for her love. She's all ears. Literally. Shub-Niggurath can be summoned to any woodland at the time of the new moon, and it's a pretty straightforward utilitarian procedure. She wants to be ushered in and welcomed to the world like a bright, beautiful, blossoming, writhing mass. Yeah, you get the picture. But what if she was real right now, right here in 2018? We as humans systematically hang our shared adoration on pretty much anything and anyone. Charles Manson had more than his fair share of misguided cult of personality. People worship the Kardashians, the Paul brothers, even mumble rappers. So why not add a colossal broodmother to that celebrity list? How there are many more benefits than just a lousy Maverick t-shirt if you dedicate your life's worship to the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young, and you won't even have to pay for it. Take Immortal Life as an example. In The Moon Lens, a short story written by Ramsey Campbell in 1964, we're given insight into a particular ritual of the Gothan Hubdak, Shub-Niggurath, a cult of her favourite once-human worshippers. When the deity deems a cultist more than worthy, a special ceremony is held in which the Black Goat of the Woods ingests the initiate through her womb and then rebirths the cultist as a weird, transformed, satyr-like being. And guess what? They're immortal too. How generous is that, right? Why would you want a new pair of Yeezys when you could be modelling immortality and a brand new pair of hooves instead? All of that could be yours for the small price of eternal servitude and your new relocation to a woodland area alongside like-minded people. You'll get to wear some pretty awesome purple robes while potentially preparing yourself to be the next human sacrifice for Shub-Niggurath's love. You'll get to stand amongst her dark, young, horrifying, pitch-black monstrosities made of ropey tentacles that are twice as tall as a tree and stink like an open grave. If you're really, really lucky, then you'd even be able to drink Shub-Niggurath's milk. Yes, you heard that correctly, her milk. If Shub-Niggurath was real, then her unrelenting cosmic love would be felt all across the cosmos, and we'd all happily fall under her warm eldritch embrace. Hold on a minute.
I can almost feel it.